So here I am out of the hospital and under orders to become a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I've already explained to you that I'm a clever person, very bright guy, and I have seen those steps written on the wall, and I know what's going on here. God, 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 God. I am willing to admit that possibly I may be a mild alcoholic. However, I cannot turn my responsibility as a circuit court judge over to you. I have 3 girlfriends to manage, plus a wife. I'm certainly not going to rely on you to help me out there. It's my money. I will spend it the way I want to spend it. So that knocks out step 1, part B. God, 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 God. I kind of like that middle part of the 12th step where I tell you what to do. Okay, I'm in. But Bob explains to me that this is a 12-step program, and it's going to be necessary that I participate in all the steps. And I explained to him my anger towards God. And Bob says, "Well, you give up on me, Alan. We took a break and you escaped." Yeah, you better.
I'm not going to be here.
When you get 10 years, Alan, you can get up and leave, but not now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Alan just suffered from a delusional thought. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm angry at God. I explained to Bob the thing that happened when I was 14. I don't want to have anything to do with that God. Bob knew my dad got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, let's see here, Jack, how old were you when you prayed that prayer that your dad would stop drinking? I said, I was 14. Be very careful, sir. Somebody has put drill bits over there. I'm not sure what they're doing to save their seats, but those drill bits will be really handy for somebody who needs to be reamed later on during this conference. I was 14 years old when I prayed that prayer. He said, how old were you when your dad got sober? I said, I was 26. He said, Jack, do you have any idea what 12 years means to infinite God? Well, I had really not given it any thought, to be perfectly honest. And Bob said, Jack, 12 years to infinite God is a nanosecond. It's an infinitesimal period of time to God. He says, as a matter of fact, I'd say you got pretty quick service. What's your problem? Well, it's good to have a sponsor, because I never contemplated that at all. He said, you prayed that your dad would get sober. Your dad got sober. What is your complaint? And of course, my complaint is it didn't happen when I wanted it to happen, the way I wanted it to happen. I now know that what was going on back before, when Bob and Ken and I were meeting on those Friday afternoons, is I was acquiring what I would like to call, or what I do call, cake mix sobriety. And by that I mean, if you and I went out to the local supermarket and we went to the cake mix department and we got a box of Duncan Hines Red Velvet Cake Mix, I can assure you that on the back of that package, Duncan Hines has put a 3-step program to produce a red velvet cake. And if I had a package of that cake mix up here at the podium with me this afternoon, I could read it to you, or I could give you the package and you could read it to me, or we could pass it around the room and we could read it to each other. And I'm the kind of guy, having read the back of the package, I start looking for my cake. I haven't done anything. I've read the package. Where's my cake? And you see, Ken and Bob and I, we were reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I wasn't doing anything. And I'm looking around for recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't done a thing, but I'm looking for recovery. I haven't opened the cake mix package, and I am looking for my red velvet cake because I have read the steps. And I'm in my office reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with Ken and Bob, and I wonder why I'm not getting anything. Ken and Bob, they knew something that I didn't know. And obviously, they knew that I didn't know what it was that they knew that I didn't know. They also knew that if I was aware or had known that they knew something that I didn't know, and that they knew that I didn't know it, and I didn't know what it was that they knew that I didn't know, that if I found out what it was that they knew that I didn't know, I would be very upset about that. But they were persistent and consistent with carrying this message of recovery to me. And so after a point of time, it became that I began to understand what it was that they knew that I didn't know. And once I began to know what it was that they knew that I didn't know, the fact that I didn't know it and they knew that they knew it and they knew that I didn't know it really didn't mean that much to me anymore, because by that time I knew what it was that they knew that I didn't know. Now, if you followed any of that, you're in the right place. And if you found out a little bit confusing, you're still in the right place. Just means you don't know. In the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, it says that the problem for the alcoholic centers in the mind. That alcohol is merely a symptom of the disease from which I suffer, a chronic, incurable, progressive, fatal disease. So not drinking's got very little to do with the progression of the disease. The thinking is what it's all about. The problem for the alcoholic centers in the mind. There's something wrong with my mind. I don't know what you all do with your minds, but all I do with my mind is think. I think. Simply how I think is my problem. S-H-I-T. Simply how I think. I am not good at it. I should not be permitted to think independently. I have a whole warehouse full of evidence of disastrous results predicated upon my thinking. I am not good at it. And my personal experience confirms what the book says. My problem is not alcohol. My problem is thinking. Simply how I think. S-H-I-T. It also says in the big book that, putting aside the drink problem, that there are 9 bedevilments from which we suffer, which are part of alcoholism. Trouble with personal relationships. Well, I told you, my wife and I are separated. I got a girlfriend, got a backup girlfriend, got a girlfriend for special occasions, so okay, I'll give you that one. Couldn't control our emotional natures. Well, I was a really, really, really angry guy. Very angry guy. Sometimes I would I ought to tell you this. I mean, really, I think in all fairness, I need to tell you that I have never, ever gotten angry at another human being that they didn't provoke me. I'm not the kind of guy that gets mad for no reason. All right? I don't just fly off the handle because somebody's got to provoke me. Justifiable anger was my specialty. Prey to misery. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Prey to depression. We are a great bunch, right? We get really depressed, and then we take a depressive substance, alcohol, so we can get really depressed. And we suffer from a disease which is a disease of loneliness, and my answer to this disease of loneliness is to isolate myself. That's my best thinking on the subject. Couldn't make a living. Now, I take issue with you there. Because you see, I'm being paid a lot of money to do what I do as a circuit court judge. And Bob said, well, Jack, that's true. They do pay you a lot of money, but you're spending a lot of money that you don't have to buy stuff that you don't want or need to impress a bunch of people you don't like. And anytime you spend more money than you're making, Jack, you're having trouble making a living. Oh, okay. Okay. Had a feeling of uselessness, full of fear. No. I've been a policeman. I've been a state senator, circuit court judge. I'm not afraid of anything. Okay? Spiders? What kind of spiders? Black widow spiders. Okay, all right. Snakes? What kind of snakes? Rattlesnakes. Well, yeah, okay. How about fear of failure? How about fear of success? Oh, another liver transplant. Well, we do have a medical center nearby, don't we? Okay. How about fear of commitment? How about fear of being found out? You want to try something interesting? When you go back to your home group next week, walk up behind somebody and whisper in their ear, "They know," and walk away. Fear of being found out. Okay, yeah. Unhappy. Couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Well, we have an answer for that in Alcoholics Anonymous, Ken and Bob told me. We have an answer for that. I thought that was daily living. I thought that's what life was all about. I thought life was about hand-to-hand combat on a daily basis. I had no idea that you could live to good order one day at a time. And yet it says right in the very front of the 12 and 12 that these 12 steps, spiritual in nature, will remove the obsession to drink. And that is a good thing, and I'm all in favor of that. But beyond that, it will render the sufferer, and that's me, it will render the sufferer happily and usefully whole. And it turns out that's the thing I always wanted to be all my life. It turns out that is the very thing that I was searching for in that bottle. And I had no idea. And in Bill's story, he writes that if an alcoholic fails to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. Wonder what they mean by that. When the doctor says that alcoholics of my type are doomed, that's not very encouraging. I don't get any uplift from that. Other places it says that it's fatal. And somewhere else it says some of us have to make the ultimate sacrifice. I think that means we die. Now, for some of us, it's a death by going out and picking up a drink. Slow suicide. 3.5 years with not drinking. Last night, Larry told us he had a sip. Just a sip. For people like me, who went through that excruciating physical pain of 7 weeks in intensive care, a sip was not an option. So I got a gun. The sheriff of our community had shot himself to death in the basement of the courthouse in his office. My office was on the top floor of the courthouse. I thought if I shot myself to death up there, it would give symmetry to the building. You think that's funny? Oh, my. Well, in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, it says that I've got to decide that either God is or he isn't. What's my choice to be? And I'm just not crazy about this God of my upbringing. And Bob said, what kind of God would you like to have, Jack? And I said, I'd like to have a loving and caring and gracious God who wants only the best for me. And he said, Jack, you can have that, but you got to take certain steps. Okay. This sounds really hard to me. It sounds really hard to me. How do I go about this, Bob? He said, well, Jack, do you see anything in Alcoholics Anonymous that you admire? And I said, yeah, Bob, I admire you and I admire Ken. I admire your sobriety. I know that there are things going on in your life that are very upsetting, but you and he are both seeming to live to good order, and I would like to learn how to do that. He said, well, if you want what we have, there's one other requirement, and that is that you be willing to go to any lengths to get it. Well, of course I'm willing to go to any lengths to get it. Certainly. That's another delusional thought, because I thought that was negotiable. I thought that was recovery on my terms. I thought that meant that I could do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, except when I thought it was inconvenient, and then I'd do what you wanted me to do. But it does say in the big book that if we read that book, we probably are going to become convinced of a couple of things, and one of those things was that I'm alcoholic, and I couldn't manage my life. And an honest, realistic appraisal of my life said that while I might be a circuit court judge and I'm being paid a big salary to solve your problems, I can't solve mine. I can't solve mine. And I've done everything that I know to do. I've been to see psychiatrists. I've been to see psychologists. I even stooped so low as to go see a social worker. And I don't mean to be unkind to social workers, but I have real problems. And a master's degree in social work, that's fine, and I know you got to work hard for that, but I want at least a PhD, you know what I mean? Smart guy like me, I want to be able to relate.
Yeah.
And here's what the psychiatrist told me the last time I walked out of his office. He said, Jack, you're doing really good. Why don't you take the summer off, and I'll see you in September. And I walked out of his office wondering if I should shoot myself that night or should I wait till the next day. That's how well I was doing. No, the answer for a person like me who's alcoholic is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I became convinced that no human power could relieve my alcoholism, and I also became convinced that God could and would. But they throw a little word in there. It says, if he were sought. I didn't sign up to be a seeker of God. I did not come here to be a seeker of God. When the book says that some of us came here bristling with antagonism, that was an understatement for me. But Bob told me I could either have the God of my understanding to be the God as I had described him, that is a loving and caring and gracious God, or I could have good orderly direction for a while. Why don't you just try that, Jack? Why don't you rely upon a home group? Get a home group. I got a home group. I went to my dad's old home group. He had been treasurer at Fellowship Hall for 10 years, and that's where Ken and Bob went, and so I went there. I got a home group. The AA waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, The evidence, Jack, of having done a third step is two things. One, I prayed it, both with my sponsor Ken and with my sponsor Bob. An outward manifestation to both of those men of an internal commitment that I had made to myself that I was going to try. I was going to try to the best of my ability this program of recovery called Alcoholics Anonymous. The second proof of a third step is a fourth step inventory. I had read ahead. I knew what you guys had in mind for me. And I've done a few things in my life that I'm not very proud of. Some kind of swarmy, kind of dark, slimy things that I swore that I would take to my grave. And if I do that inventory, I know you're going to want to hear that stuff. So I'm not going to do that inventory. And Bob said, okay, you're doomed. I beg your pardon? You're doomed, Jack. If you're not going to do it, you might as well just grab your ankles, bend over, grab your ankles, and kiss your ass goodbye, because that's it. You're going to get convicted by 12, carried by 6, or you're going to learn how to live by spiritual principles. That's it. Hey, what happened to Monty Hall? What happened to Let's Make a Deal? What happened to door number 3? What happened to the easier, softer way? There is no such thing. Not for alcoholics. Maybe for other people, but not for alcoholics. I either got to learn to live by spiritual principles, or I'm going to die an alcoholic death. And that's it. That's it. Dr. Silkworth said to Bill, impress upon them the fatal nature of the malady from which we suffer. Alcoholism is not a respecter of age, education, sex, race, religion. Alcoholism doesn't care. It's an equal opportunity destroyer. It will remove everything of value from my life and beat me into the ground like a peg and then spit on me while I'm down and let me live a horrible alcoholic life before I die an alcoholic death. So I began that four-step inventory, and as I'm sure you're probably wondering the same thing I am. I don't know what Mrs. Jones's problem is. I don't know. I got a pretty good idea what Brown's looking for, but so with resentments. I mean, this is an easy thing for me. I could tell you at the drop of a hat. I could give you a list of names and tell you what they did to me, just like that. No problem. No problem. Oh, you want me to do what? How it affects my instincts? All the stuff that's listed there, that self-esteem and security and ambitions and that stuff? Well, okay, I can do that. And I remember the day, very proud I was. I was like a kid, like a kid at kindergarten or first grade. You bring your project home to your parent. I took my four-step inventory and I went over to Bob's and I knocked on the door, and he came to the door and he said, well, what can I do for you, Jack? I said, I got my four-step inventory here. And so he looks at it and he says, well, you do. That's very good, Jack. And I was so proud. And he said, I see you got what you're resentful at. I see you got the cause down there. I see you got what it affects in you. That's very good. Where's the fourth column? Fourth column, Bob? There is no fourth column. Oh, yes, Jack, most assuredly, there is a fourth column. Oh, no, Bob. No. I have read that book. I know there are 3 columns. It's right there on page 65. I know that. No, Jack, there's a fourth column. Bob, I'm willing to bet you money that there is no fourth column. And Bob smiled. And I knew I was in trouble. He said, I'll be right back. And he came back with his big book, and he turned it to page 67. Referring to our list again and putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked at our own mistakes. That's the column, Jack. And that's where the rubber meets the road for me. I've come to understand what this is about. This is about uncovering and discovering in Jack the things that have been blocking me from the sunlight of the Spirit. You know, I am seeking a relationship with the God of my understanding, but I can't have that relationship when I am blocked off from the sunlight of the Spirit. I got to get down to causes and conditions. I have to remove those things which have been standing in my way. And this is where I first became aware of my role in it. I didn't have any problem giving you a list of names on people of what they'd done to me. I had no problem doing that. It was a little harder to discern what was affected in me. But to get down and actually say what my role in it was. I mean, for crying out loud, my father was an alcoholic, so he was number one on my resentment list, and I had a host of things that I was upset about with my dad. And Bob said, "Were you the best son that you could be, Jack? Were you always honest? Did you ever steal from your dad, Jack? Did you ever steal his affection? Did you ever remove yourself? Did you ever cut him off from you when he asked for you to come?" Okay. All right. Well, okay. We can get through that. We'll do that. And fear, but, okay, I got that fear of commitment. I got that fear of being found out. I got that fear thing. Why do I have these fears? What is the root cause of my fears? The root cause of Jack's fears are as Jack has worshiped at the altar of self-sufficiency all of his life. I have worshiped at the altar of self-sufficiency all of my life, and my self-sufficiency has failed me. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced fear of impending doom, but let me tell you that fear of impending doom is just that. It's impending doom, because it's going to happen. It is going to happen. There's no question about it. So long as I am self-sufficient, it is going to happen. Now, I don't recommend getting blown up as a learning experience. But let me tell you this. It will get you to focus a little bit on what the heck's going on. And I had plans on that day. And I had plans for Christmas, and I had plans for New Year's, and I had plans for well into 1990. And getting blown up wasn't part of Jack's plan. And I don't think for a minute that God caused that to happen. I think that happened because some selfish, self-centered, self-indulgent, resentful, hateful person sent me a bomb intended to kill me. And by the grace of God, I was spared. By the grace of God, I was spared. And I am fully satisfied that God can take something that's intended for evil and turn it for good for those of us who are willing to believe in God's power. And our book says the power of God goes deep. And I came to appreciate that. We got a fourth step prayer, part B, that we pray that God would take this fear from us. And immediately we begin to outgrow fear. And that's my experience. I don't have the paralyzing fear that I used to have. I don't have the kind of fear that I used to have that I would just stay in bed and pull the covers up over my head, and I'm not coming out. And I tell my wife, call to court and tell them I'm sick. I'm not coming. I'm not coming. And I don't go because I'm just afraid. I'm afraid. Oh, now, I don't know about your home group, but back in Hagerstown, whenever we're going to do step 4, part C, sex, we get record crowds because they think there's going to be like a slideshow or something, a short movie. And I've got a little problem with relationships because, every one of those separations, there were girlfriends and backup girlfriends and girlfriends on the side. And I don't know, it says we all have sex problems. That was encouraging. Again, I wasn't the only one. Did I ever have a relationship with another human being, male or female, in which I wasn't selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Never. Never. If I could use you, I'd use you. If there was something in it for me, I'd do something, whatever it was, if there was something in it for me. But otherwise, I got no use for you. None whatsoever. I think this is more about relationships than it is just about sex. I think they put sex in here just to suck me in. Turns out that I am just incapable of having a healthy relationship with anybody because of who and what I am, because of my alcoholism. And we got these prayers in here. We got 4-step prayers, part C. And when this imperious urge becomes really, really overpowering, then, Jack, throw yourself into working with others. But I don't want to work with others. I don't want to help you. I want you to help me. What about me? I have no objection to your helping me, but I don't want to help you. I don't like you. Did you say, Peg, that if you love everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous, you haven't been to enough meetings? Would I be quoting you correctly? Well, that's my experience also. So what are we going to do? Well, we do that uncovering part. In the discovering part, this admitting to God and to myself and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. I think that admitting to God and to myself is really a gut check for me. I mean, God already knows. I'm the one that suffers from delusional thinking. I mean, it says back in the 3rd step material in the book that alcoholics suffer from 100 forms of self-delusion and 100 forms of self-centered fear. So it's little wonder. I mean, we've already ticked off and identified a half a dozen delusional thoughts that I possess, and I got hundreds more. Hundreds of them. I can't differentiate the true from the false. That is my problem. That's simply how I think things. I can't differentiate the true from the false. That is a delusional thought. That's what delusional thinking is about. I tell myself a lie, I believe it to be true, and I take action on it. It's a psychotic mental condition. I am crazier than a March hare. And I think that's one of the reasons why you invited me here. This, however, does call into consideration your sanity because you're sitting here patiently listening to me. Hundred forms of self-delusions, fear, self-seeking, self-pity. I'm driven by this stuff, and I got no idea. But you know what happens when I sit down with Bob and do my 5th step? And I talk about that stuff, or at least I think I've talked about the stuff, and then Bob says, well, now, we've covered a lot of ground, Jack, and it's been a good talk. And he said, I'm going to go get myself a cup of coffee. He said, I'll just let you sit here quietly for a minute. But he said, it would be a shame to let this moment go to waste, because you're probably holding something back. You're probably hanging on to something, and let me tell you something. If you hang on to it, you're going to lose the moment, and it's going to kill you. Because I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're only as sick as our secrets, and this is an inside job, and the stuff that I keep secret and keep inside rots me from the inside out. And I always thought when I would come in. When I was a little kid and I'd fallen and skinned my knee, and I would come to my mother crying, and she would cleanse the wound, and she'd put mercurochrome or methylate on it, and she'd put a bandage on it, and she'd kiss it. And I thought that had a lot to do with the healing, and it had nothing to do with the healing. All my mom did is prepare an environment in which God could do the healing. She cleansed the wound, and that was important, but God did the healing. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think I have to clean myself up in order to present myself to God, and I find out here that that's not what God wants at all. God wants me to just present myself, and He'll do the cleaning up. And so what Alcoholics Anonymous provides me with is an environment in which healing can take place. And I don't know how broken I am inside. I have no idea. And so I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you give me this opportunity to uncover and discover, and then to begin to discard the things in myself that have been keeping me from the sunlight of the Spirit. And so I find out that Alcoholics Anonymous provides an environment in which healing can take place, and that broken hearts can be mended, and sweet relationships can be restored. And so I did that fifth step with Bob, and I told him about those swarmy things that I swore I would never tell another human being. And much to my relief, Bob did not go running from the room. He did not tell me to get out of his house, you filthy man. He did not just roll his eyes up into the back of his head. If the truth be known, I think he was kind of falling asleep during a lot of what I was telling him, which I was somewhat offended by at the time, but having done a lot of fifth steps now with a lot of people that I've sponsored, there is nothing new under the sun. I am sorry. I mean, if you're here with 6 months or less and you haven't done a fifth step, I'd be happy to hear your fifth step or go get your sponsor, because believe me, you're not that good at being bad. You really aren't. Oh, there might be a buffalo or a little sheep or a goat in there somewhere, but believe me, you're not the first and you're not going to be the last. I mean, that's just the way it is. We are not that good at being bad. There may have been some bad things happen. We may have done some bad things, but that's not who we are. That's when we're alcoholic. And when the healing takes place, we become somebody completely different. And what do I discover when I do that fourth and a fifth step? I find out what the role of this stuff has been in my life. The dishonesty in my life, the self-centeredness in my life, the inconsiderate behavior, the fear in my life, the power that these things have over me. And do I want to hang on to that? Would I like to become a man of integrity? Yes, I would like to be a man of integrity. I would like to be honest. Would I like to live free of anger and resentment? Yes, I would like to learn how to do that. Would I like to be free of the fear, the paralyzing fear? Yes, I'd like to be free of that. Oh, I will have fear, okay, because that's instinctive, but not the paralyzing fear. Well, Jack, if you're willing to have God remove those things from you, then you're at step 7. I beg your pardon? You're at step 7. I'm always amazed when I talk to people that I sponsor. Well, I said, well, how do you like being dishonest? I don't like it. Or how do you like being afraid? I don't like being afraid. How do you like being angry all the time? I don't like it. Would you like God to take it away? Sure. Well, step 7. What happened to 6? You just did it. Am I willing to have God remove from me these things which I find to be objectionable? I mean, the book does not spend a lot of time on this. I mean, I'm pretty amazed. It's in a chapter called Into Action, and it just amazes me. It says go home. It says go home and sit quietly for an hour. And of course, we alcoholics, we understand that an hour could be 6 months. For some of us, it could be 6 years. But they are kind of interested in us doing this quickly, not slowly, because the more I hesitate in doing this, the longer I am at risk. I am at risk of dying a horrible alcoholic death. So I'm encouraged here to do this quickly. And so I want to get rid of this selfishness, this dishonesty, this resentment and anger and fear. And so what do? Well, hey, we got a prayer. It's only 1 paragraph long, 4 little petitions. And we're done. Now, of course, we're only done for the day that we did it, because if I don't die tonight, I have an opportunity tomorrow morning to make a decision. And that decision is whether or not I want to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, or is this the day that I take charge of the bus, get back behind the wheel. Jack's going to be in charge today. I think this is the day. It's an alcoholic thought. Got to stop thinking like that. Upon awakening, I pray the 3rd step prayer, I pray the 7th step prayer, I read the daily reflection or some other literature and try to sit quietly and do what the book suggests that I do. And as Larry said last night, it's been working for a while now. And I think there's a really, really good chance that I'm going to end up today, Friday. I'm not going to drink today. I'm pretty sure of that. But it's not because of the stuff that I did yesterday. It's because of the stuff that I did today. I cannot stay sober today on yesterday's prayers. It says in our book that there is one that has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Not tomorrow. And not yesterday. God's not in yesterday, and he's not in tomorrow. God's here. It's now. It's what I do now. I told Chuck when I was talking to him this morning, I said, if you feel like going drinking, give me a call. I might want to go with you. I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to have the opportunity to be invited to go drinking with you. We can talk about it. But we'll talk about it in the now. We're not going to talk about what we're going to do New Year's Eve. How am I going to get past the Christmas holidays not drinking? It's August, for God's sake. They made beer for this kind of weather. This is why God made beer. I know that. And if I start thinking about a cold bottle of Heineken's with that bead of sweat just trickling down the side of the bottle, I can be in trouble in about 6.5 seconds. So it's what I do today, right here, right now. Okay, well, what do I do now, Bob? Well, you make a list, Jack. You make a list of all those persons you harmed, and you became willing to make amends to them all. What's that last word mean, Bob? It means all. You don't mean all, do you, Bob? That's what it means, Jack. Well, Bob, I'm not making amends to some of those people. I'm not doing it. Now, in this case, Bob and Ken deviated somewhat from the program of recovery. I don't recommend this necessarily, but if you're dealing with a knucklehead or a hardhead like me, you might want to try this. Rather than making the hardest amends first, as Larry did last night, I'm the kind of guy I like to make the easy ones first. So they allowed me to make 3 columns. Column A, the people I'll make amends to now. Column B, the people I might make amends to. And column C, the people I will never make amends to. They allowed me to do that. This was kind of an AA bait and switch operation because here again, they knew something that I didn't know, and I didn't know what it was that they knew that I didn't know, and that if I knew that they knew something that I didn't know, that I would have been upset that they knew it, but I didn't know it, and they knew that I didn't know it, so it was okay. They allowed me to have my own delusional little way of doing it, and of course what they knew was that once I began making those amends to the people that I was willing to make amends to, the experience in and of itself propelled me to make amends to those people that I said I might make amends to. And that experience propelled me to make amends to those people that I said I would never make amends to, so that I could walk free in our community, so that I could walk down the street and not have to duck into a doorway to avoid somebody, so that I could look somebody in the eye and know that everything was okay between us. I think we read, beginning of this meeting, it said some of us owe money. Duh. I mean, I don't know, maybe you came into AA on a winning streak, but I sure didn't. And one day, you got to be really careful about what you tell your sponsors, because they do have a different way of looking at stuff. And I was contemplating buying a stereo system, a really nice stereo system. It's going to cost $1,000. Now, of course, having done my fifth step with Bob and Ken was aware that I owed her $5,000. And so I'm telling Ken about this stereo system that I saw. It was on sale, good price, and I think I'm going to get it, $1,000. He said, well, what does Irv think of that? I said, what the hell does Irv have to do with this? He says, well, don't you owe him $5,000? I said, well, yeah, sure, but I'm buying a stereo. This isn't about paying back Irv. He says, well, you're using his money. Oh. Sponsors have a way of seeing stuff differently. They really do. They really do. And so, deferred gratification is not my strong suit. I don't know about you. Because I do want what I want when I want it. When I set my mind to something, I want it. I want it now, I want it. And I've learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous that I don't need to have instant gratification. That I can do first things first, and I can pay Irv back his $5,000, which I did. And then if I choose to buy a stereo, I can. But I don't ever have to be guilt-ridden that Irv might see that stereo and wonder where I got the money for it, while not paying him back, while I'm telling him I don't have the money. I learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you owe somebody $5,000, you don't have to go in and slap all $5,000 on the desk at one time. You can pay $100 a month. Did you know that? You can. If you pay $100 a month at the end of the year, you'll have paid $1,200. Can you believe that? And if you do that for 5 years, you'll pay that $5,000 off and have money left over. Unbelievable. I don't know where they get this stuff. I never knew that. I wanted to go into, there's your damn money. Yeah, that's me. But I find out here you can do it another way. Now, you say, well, this making amends situation, it says, well, some of us have got criminal problems, and what about the guy that we hate, and some of us owe money, and some of us have been, not faithful in our marriages, and then there's others of us who may not have that problem, but there's a lot of work that's got to be done at home. And boy, if that isn't an understatement. But you know what the book says? It says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous have to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, a personality change sufficient to overcome alcoholism. It says in the front of the book, it says that we are 100 people who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. It doesn't say we've recovered from alcoholism. It says we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. My father was an alcoholic. He died with 15 years of continuous sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. He died with alcoholism. He didn't die because of it. I hope that I'll be able to say the same thing when the time has come for me to go, that I will die with alcoholism, but I will not die as a result of a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. I have recovered from that. I have been taught how to live to good order. And so the work continues at home, because we are indeed tornadoes roaring through the lives of other people. This fact, I come in and say I'm sorry, they just don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They've heard it before. They have heard it time and time again. They just don't want to put faith in it. People are not interested in what I say. They're interested in what I do. How do I behave? How do I behave? You want to find out whether my program of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous is working? Then call a meeting of my wife and my children and the people I work with and my sponsor and ask them. I don't want to attend that meeting myself. And my reticence in attending that meeting is some indication that there's some work for me to do yet, but this is a work in progress, and we're all on the potter's wheel. And I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous that this amends thing is an ongoing thing. This surrender to God on a daily basis is an ongoing thing. This asking God to take my defects of character from me is an ongoing thing. I can't tell you that this week that I'm working on anger. That's a self-identified problem, and if I could identify my problem and work on it, then I wouldn't have to be here, because I'd be relying on Jack. And while I'm working on anger, maybe God would want me to be working on fear or lust. And so what I understand is that God gives me an opportunity on a moment-by-moment, hour-by-hour basis to work on different things. And maybe it's when I'm driving on the freeway and the little old lady is in my lane. You know how it is, it's my lane. Or they cut me off. Don't they know who I am? I mean, how about those grocery store 11 items or less, cash only? These are great places for us to go and practice patience and tolerance. I mean, it's just wonderful. Just stand in line, say the Serenity Prayer, pray that lady has all the good things happen in her life that I would like to have happen in my life. Okay, she's looking for the pennies now. Okay, now she can't pay cash. She's going to write them a check, and it's a cash-only line. And do 6 bananas in a bunch constitute one item, or are they 6 items? This is of concern to me. It's an ongoing process. I was sitting in fellowship hall one afternoon, and somebody was talking about having stolen a case of beer off a guy's back porch, and I never did that. I never did that. And then the voice, you may know the voice, I don't know, the voice said to me, "What about that case of beer you stole off of Percy Divalbus's back porch?" I was 17 years old. "Yeah, but you stole a case of beer off his back porch." Well, I guess you're going to tell me now I got to go make amends to Percy Divalbus? Yeah, you do. He was an old guy when I stole the beer. He's got to be dead. I was encouraged by that. Until he pulled up next to me at the traffic light on North Potomac Street. My God, it's Percy Divalbus. I thought he was dead. I haven't seen him for 30 years. And he drove off. I'll probably never see him for another 30 years. I felt good about that. Till I was standing in line at the post office and he walked in behind me. "How you doing, Mr. Divalbus? Nice to see you." I don't think I'll ever see him again. And then the following week, he was in the grocery store in the line ahead of me. He didn't see me, but I saw him. I know what I'm supposed to do. He cannot possibly be living in the same house. So I went out and drove by, and there the mailbox was out alongside the road, and don't you know it said on it, Divalbus. Must be one of the kids living in the house. He's got to be in a nursing home, and I believe that. Till a week later when I drove by and he was mowing the yard. So I stopped and whatever, "Mr. Divalbus, you know who I am?" He says, "Well, no, I'm not quite sure." I said, "Well, I'm Jack Quarterman." He said, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I remember you. I said, "Mr. Divalbus, about 30 years ago, I stole a case of beer off your back porch. I think it was probably worth about $3.25. I was wondering if you'd take $20 for it." He said, "What?" I repeated myself. He said, "Would you come around back for a minute?" Sure. Went around back, and there was Mrs. Divalbus. He said, "Honey, do you know who this is?" She said, "No, Percy, I don't." He said, "This is Judge Quarterman, and he stole a case of beer off our back porch." And he wants to give me $20 for it. What do you think? And she said, "Oh, Percy, we had so many great parties back then, we would have never missed a case of beer." And he said, "Yeah, I know, but I just wanted you to see Judge Quarterman." He told me to give the money to a charity, and I gave it to the Salvation Army. But you know, I haven't thought about Percy Divalbus since. And when I see him and the members of his family, I don't have to worry about looking them in the eye, because I can look them in the eye. And I know this is an ongoing process as far as the stuff that's happened in the past, because things bubble up. They bubble up. And I have been firmly of the belief that once we begin doing this 9th step business, that just like the big book says, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we're going to be amazed before we're halfway through. That's halfway through the 9th step. Because as I understand the program of recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's not about finishing step 9 so I can work on 10. It's about beginning step 9 so I can live in 10, 11, and 12. Because this thing that we are embracing here, this thing that we've been so graciously given here, this free gift that's being offered to us here, is a gift of a new way of life. Not the old way of life, not drinking. No, that's called stark, raving sobriety. That's the insanity of untreated alcoholism. not drinking and not changing. I hear a lot of well-meaning people say don't drink and go to meetings. I know they're well-meaning, but it seems to me if you're going to tell somebody don't drink and go to meetings, it wouldn't hurt to say get a sponsor, get a big book, get a home group, take the steps. That would really help somebody. But if somebody thinks that they can be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous by not drinking and going to meetings, and they think it can be received by osmosis, shoot down your arm into me by osmosis, I'll die. I will die. Because if I believe that, then I won't ever take any action on the program of recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll die of that delusional thought. I think it's real important that we differentiate between delusion and denial. Denial is a treatment center word. It's not a word of Alcoholics Anonymous. We suffer from 100 forms of self-delusion. Denial is when Fred goes out of the room and I take his coffee mug, and he comes back in and says, Jack, did you take my coffee mug? And I got it right here under my coat. And I say, no. Oh, I know I got it. I'm just denying it. I'm not giving it up. I'm not fessing up. I know the truth. I'm just denying it. But a delusional thought is when I take the coffee cup and I got it under my coat and he asked me if I took it and I say no and I believe that. I'm not sure what this bulge is here under my coat. I'm certainly not going to look. But I didn't take it, Fred. And I believe it to be true, so I'm getting a little agitated that you're insisting that I must have done it. I suffer from 100 forms of self-delusion. And so if I'm going to live to good order, if I'm going to learn to be of maximum service to God and to my fellow man, I got to get active in 10, 11, and 12 sooner than later. And in order to do that, I have to do the preceding steps. Don't have to finish the preceding steps, just have to do them on a daily basis to continue to make progress. We're not going to become perfect people here. We're going to become better people. I'm being molded and shaped on the potter's wheel. It is an ongoing thing. It's the kind of thing where just when I think, I said to somebody at lunch today, or before lunch, people ask me, how you doing today, Jack? And I'll tell you, I am happy, joyous, and free today, but I think it's going to get better. And why do I think it's going to get better? Because last year on this weekend, I was in York, Pennsylvania, and I didn't think life could have gotten any better than it was on that weekend. And here we are in the 8th month of 2006, and 2006 has already exceeded 2005. My life is infinitely better today because of the program of recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous. But if I stopped doing the things that work in this program, if I stop doing the prayers of this program, this whole thing turns out to be a prayer. I didn't come here to pray. I came here to scoff. I really did. I didn't want to have anything to do with things of religion. I don't like church. I didn't like the church I grew up in, and I don't want to have anything to do with church, so leave me alone. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you teach me that this is not about religion. I truly believe religion is for people who believe there is a hell. And a spiritual life is for people who have been there. And I come here as a human being searching for a spiritual experience. And I find out I'm a spiritual being. And I'm having a human experience. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. And then we're going to come back to wrap this thing up.